Hey guys, I want to welcome you to the weekly Wednesday for the Financial Freedom newsletter, where every week, every Wednesday, we delve into something inspirational, motivational, something excerpt taken from the Financial Freedom weekly newsletter. Wherever you are, if you're listening on Spotify, on iTunes, Google, be sure to click the like, subscribe, share, comment. And without ado, let's get into the show. Welcome everybody to this week's podcast episode for the Financial Freedom Podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Christopher Liu. And as you know, I talk about 4 different types of freedom: time, financial, location, health freedom. And in that light, I'm always interviewing artists, creators, influencers, entrepreneurs on the cutting edge, changing the world, impacting their audiences. So today's interview is going to be all about podcasting, how podcasting can help your audience, your business, as well as the different business models around it. So to help us with that, we have Spencer Carpenter, and he loves discussing the power of podcast interviews. He's also a podcast booking agent. He's booked over 800 plus interviews and garnered over millions of listeners, and a lot of the guests on my show have gone through Spencer. So it's going to be a great conversation, and I'm excited. So Spencer, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to being able to provide whatever value I can to your listeners.
Yeah, we met through Podmatch, and it's a great community. And tell us more about your story and how you founded Outlier Audio.
Yes, sure. So I was in music for 15 years, and I started off booking concerts in my hometown because my cousins wouldn't let me into their band, and I kind of just kept going after high school. I scaled that up to doing multi-day music conferences and festivals, and I ran a couple record labels and did other types of talent representation. But pretty much no matter what I did, I was on either side of talent representation. And then when COVID shut down the music industry, I had already been listening to podcasts for a little while, mostly around different types of investing and like real estate investing. And I would hear people were talking about how, they didn't do very well in school, but they were able to figure out how to flip houses pretty well. And I started to realize that entrepreneurs typically aren't looked at as talent, unless they're like on Shark Tank, unless they are Mark Cuban or Richard Branson or something. But there are a lot of talented investors and entrepreneurs and business professionals out there. And I just thought people, they should start being looked at as more than just their profession, but like they're talented at their profession. And so I wanted to start servicing those people. And, I just saw, especially in COVID lockdown, I saw podcasts as a way for them to, quote, perform while they were stuck at home. Meetups and conferences and expos were all shut down. I was like, this is the way that they can still get in front of people and continue to grow their business, get leads, make connections, whatever it might be. And so I just started this concept of booking entrepreneurs, business professionals, and investors on podcasts.
Yeah. I love the music industry because it's always on the forefront of innovation, culture, technology, and especially, podcasting is kind of a niche, and it's really kind of gone mainstream, so many different uses.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about a little bit. We'll get into it, the power of podcasts, why it's more than just marketing.
Yeah. So the reason that I really like the podcast format is I found podcasts because I was spending a lot of time in my car, but I didn't want to listen to audiobooks. I found audiobooks to be boring. I don't know if anyone else has ever tried to listen to some of these older, like, the books that everyone tells you to listen to on entrepreneurship and stuff, but they're old, like Napoleon Hill and stuff. It just does not come through well. I've tried reading it. I've tried listening to it both multiple times, and I have a hard time. So I found podcasts as a way to continue learning. And as I started like learning more about the industry, what I realized is it's very different from the typical type of marketing that a lot of people are putting money into, such as ads through Facebook or Instagram or something like that. That's disruptive marketing, where you're trying to, you need to create a piece of content that's 30 or 60 seconds long. You need to get someone's attention. You need to keep someone's attention. You have to get them to your website. You have to get them to convert. Maybe there's other steps in there. And you have to do it all with this 30-second piece of content. And what I liked about podcasts is the long form conversation where the listener can learn about the person they're hearing, their motivation. They can learn why they're passionate about it. They can hear jokes, they can hear their personality and stuff like that. And I just found that there are all these businesses fighting for the attention of people for seconds when there are people volunteering to listen to podcasts for 45 minutes to an hour. And so that whole time is rapport building. And maybe it's a smaller audience than what would happen if you were running ads, but that quality time that's being spent with the listener, getting to know the speaker more, is way more valuable than any ad on TV could be. I mean, look, I'm not saying that big brands aren't being successful TV ads, but I'm saying to really learn about an individual, you can't do it with a short clip. And so I think that it's not that podcasts are undervalued. People understand the value of podcasts, but I think this is one part of it that a lot of people, if they're not really into marketing, don't really grasp, is just how valuable 45 minutes of someone volunteering to listen to you is how valuable that is.
Yeah, a couple of points you brought up was really interesting. It's fascinating, just the types of mediums, like how you can reach people, and it's just how you can educate people. And it's not just traditional books anymore. It's like videos. It's anything in media and content, and then this idea where it's like you have this return on attention. You have so much competition on YouTube and Instagram, and then it's easier to build on TikTok and podcast and all these different LinkedIn as well. So we're almost entering into this hybrid. What do you think about this hybrid of where you're doing short form content to promote long form content on podcasting, and podcasting not just interview style, but there's like short stories, there's podcast short formats now. Tell us more.
I mean, I think they cater to not just different demographics, but just different personality types. Like I do not care about TikTok personally. When TikTok came out, I was like, this is just one more social media platform, and I've gone through plenty now. I don't need another one. I understand the value of it. I especially understand that their algorithm is better than the rest. But it's not for me. But there are plenty of other people it is for. It's clearly successful. And so if an entrepreneur can learn how to use all of them, they can, the sky's the limit. But I think that especially for a topic that, I work with a lot of investors. There's only so much information you can convey in a short piece of content. And even if you can learn how to condense it very well, you're still leaving out details, or there's only so many there's only so much content you can create without needing that ability to go further. That's the way I look at it. But, I welcome someone to challenge me on it and just create a very comprehensive piece of content in less than 60 seconds. If you can do it, then great, more power to you. But again, going back to the idea of whether you're a podcast host or a podcast guest, if you are looking at the time being spent on a longer form medium as time that is building rapport with the listener, I mean, it's just a great tool for that.
One thing is, because you mentioned earlier that you've been on both sides of the talent, and you help actually guests get on the podcast. So from your experience, how do you present and pitch your guests to a podcast, and some of the tools being used to book interviews?
Yeah. So being in music, I did have to pitch people bands, that they've never heard of from across the country. I was also in sponsorship for my festival. I was kind of used to just having to create these pitches that were full of detail without also being so long that the person didn't want to read it. Over time, I found that if your opening like sentence on a pitch can explain what unique angle or value proposition you have to provide to a host and a listener, they'll read the rest of the bio, no matter how long it is, as long as you can capture them in like that first sentence. And so I typically lead with the subject line of, how to blank, blank, blank with guest name. I don't do like podcast submission. I don't want to waste the limited space in the subject line with podcast submission. And then it is typically I'm reaching out about so and so being on so and so show to discuss topic one, topic two, topic three, and I lead with my three best topics. And it's definitely like you don't want to lead off with, I can speak about entrepreneurship, I can speak about marketing, I can speak about personal finance. You have to explain to them what it is you're saying that's different. And it's not always about having groundbreaking concepts. Sometimes it's repackaging it. For example, I have one client that's a real estate wholesaler. And while he was on vacation, he had $100,000 in wholesale fees come in. And so we used the topic of how to make $100,000 on vacation. And it wasn't anything special. He hired well. He had good systems. So it reinforced the conversation that the podcast host has had before about how you need to have good systems in order to scale and to be able to have income coming in when, even when you're not working. But we were able to lead with this great result of, having done it correctly. And so, there are definitely some people out there that are thought leaders that have something truly unique to pitch. And there are other people that need to work a little bit around how to create something a little more creative on a subject they might have already covered. But if you can repackage it into a way that that grabs the host attention, it works out just fine. I work for many people that, I work for plenty of financial planners and wealth managers and attorneys, these people that are legally bound by some of the things they can and cannot say. But I just get to know them. I learn their backstory, maybe learning that the person's family, I have a financial planner and her job is to help businesses like mom and pop shops be ready for when they want to exit and retire, because a lot of people don't know how to set it up that way. And so her thing is she was an immigrant and her family had an import-export business, and her dad was diagnosed with some terminal illness, and it completely wrecked the ability for them to run the business, and they didn't have it set up in a way that they could sell it or get anything out of it passively. And so her whole backstory is like, I want to help businesses be in avoid the position that my parents were in. And again, she's a financial planner, which like a lot of financial planners do very similar things, but we're not selling the fact that she's a financial planner. We're selling her story and her motivation and why she works with the people she does. That way they understand why she's the right person for them.
Yeah.
And so that's really what I work with people to figure out, is what is their unique value proposition? What is the angle that they can address that maybe someone else that is not a competitor, but someone else with the same job, what's different,
I like that. In this saturated day, there's like ideas are all there. And then like, when I'm trying to choose like which podcast to listen to, it's like kind of the same concept, but if it's like, a new speaker or like a different angle or a different slant, different take on things, that's the value. That's what piques my interest.
Right.
And that's what you're talking about, like just kind of creative ways of differentiating yourself. Then you also do that. You talk about the ways doing podcast interviews can dramatically increase revenue for any business, for hosts, for guests, even for your company, which helps guests get onto podcasts. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So obviously, if you're a guest, you're being presented as a thought leader, and if you go and do an interview, you're not pitching yourself. It's a one-on-one conversation, between the guests and the host. And obviously the guest gets to present why they are an expert in their field, what it is they know. And then at the end, usually the host is like, tell people where they can find your website, that sort of thing. So obviously leads can be generated in that way. You're also just getting very unique SEO. There are plenty of people that have paid for articles to be written about them or something like that. And then it ends up going out to a news wire of 300 different outlets, but it's all the same thing. And so it's always the same subject line. It's the same body. It's just with a different a different outlet. And so it creates, if you do, let's just say 10 podcast interviews, every podcast interview is going to it's going to be a different conversation. The notes that the host writes about the guest are going to be different. The subject line or the title of the podcast is going to be different. So it creates a lot of really unique SEO. And also the host has now just created content that the person can repurpose on their social media. So those are all some of the things you can do on the side that have their own ROI, repurposing that material to then generate more leads or to run ads or something like that. But in addition, from let's just say from the host side, a lot of people think that you're just starting if they've never thought about it or they don't know anything about it, they just think people are starting this podcast. It's just this thing they're doing. They don't realize that it's if you're doing it correctly, it's a funnel into your business. There's usually a way that you are, maybe the podcast itself isn't talking about your business, and it's not even necessarily talking about what you do, but the people you're interviewing are your potential client, or they're a potential a potential referral source. And so the example of that is, if someone is a CPA and they focus on real estate investors as their client, then they might host a real estate investing show. Don't really talk about the tax side of it. They just have real estate investors on. And then at the end of it, they're able to schedule a call with that real estate investor to talk about, do you need real estate specific tax advising services? And then as you're also generating these listeners of real estate investors, you're building up a base that you can collect their emails or get them to come to your website or whatever it might be. And they're also the potential client. And it's not even with the host having a show that talks about taxes, even though they're a CPA. So they could also have a show that's about taxes, being a CPA. That's great too. But there are lots of ways to set it up in a way that it is, it's going into their business. It's one of these things where sometimes people ask, like, how do you make money with a podcast? And the P&L on the podcast itself might not be profitable.
Yeah.
But the exposure it gave to this other area of the business, it made all the difference. That's how a lot of people like to look at it. It's part of this broader marketing campaign. You don't always know where the lead came from, unfortunately. But if you see that it's working, then a lot of people, they realize that there is value in this.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like a book, because most, like, for example, unless you're like a John Grisham or J.K. Rowling, most books you don't get the majority. You get some income, but it's more for your brand and kind of tell clients you're an expert and you can get asked to speak or consulting or full time. So same thing with podcasts too, and the beauty of it is.
Lots of people think it's the money is on the marketing, the selling of ads on the front end. And that's like usually the bottom tier. Sorry, I mean to interrupt you, but that's just how a lot of people think of it, Yeah,
exactly. It's like everybody's thinking front end, but then if you think, like, the beauty of this is like it's a creative space. So it's awesome for entrepreneurs because you can create things and try different things, and no one way is right. People use the tools and resources that they have, and so there's just so many different ways. I love this conversation. How can people contact you, follow you if they're interested in getting on the more podcasts? How can they reach out to you?
Yeah, so my website is just outlieraudio.com, OUTLIER audio.com. We are also on Instagram under the same name. My personal Instagram is just my name, Spencer Carpenter, and I'm on LinkedIn as well. And yeah, just schedule a call. Again, I specialize in investors, entrepreneurs, and business professionals. And while my main thing is that I get them booked on the podcast, we also have an arm of the business that helps people launch podcasts, run it, distribute it, and that sort of thing.
Nice. It sounds like, talking to you, you have a lot of experience coming from the music industry, the talent industry, and applying it to the podcast industry. And for all the listeners out there, be sure to follow Spencer. He's on LinkedIn, Instagram. His website is outlieraudio.com. Go there, enter your name and email, see if it's a good fit. And with that, I want to thank Spencer for a fantastic conversation and dropping so many nuggets of wisdom.
Thanks so much for having me, Christopher.
I hope you really enjoyed that wonderful, inspirational, motivational piece. Again, wherever you are listening, if you liked it, be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe. We're on everywhere: Spotify, iTunes, Google, Amazon, Audible. And without much ado, be sure to thank this show's sponsors, and we'll see you next week.